Okay, this video is for all of you new teachers out there. The principals asked me to inform you new teachers about assessment, interventions, language assessments, and so on. So I'm going to go step by step and define them, provide examples, explain how they fit into the process of remediation and intervention, explain the reading specialist or literacy specialist role with each one, and explain how students are involved in that process. So the first one is reading or literacy assessment. So that assessment is resources, are resources that the reading specialist uses in order to determine what types of tools are needed to support the individual student. So these can be informal, they can be formal, formative, summative, screening, or using diagnostics. And these provide single data points for the specialist to work off of. So example would be a running record where a student reads aloud while the teacher records errors, self-corrects, and any other literacy behaviors are also observed at this stage in this assessment. Literacy assessments are used to identify struggling readers who are in need of intervention to close the gaps and to get them back on track. The reading specialist uses assessments in order to identify struggling readers or to assess what the student can or cannot control in their reading and writing. And the level of involvement with the student might depend on the assessment that's being used for how the student is presented with the assessment. Some informal assessments, a student may not even be aware of that it is an assessment. Other curriculum-based measurements would have to be explained to the student as to what exactly the goal of the assessment is. The next one, language assessments. So the definition of language assessments are collecting information and making judgments about the knowledge of a language and ability that a student has to use it. There are 4 major categories here: testing, speaking, listening, and reading and writing, which focus on the individual skill. An example of this that you might be familiar with is AccuPlacer. Right Placer tests measures the ability to write effectively. Students will be assessed on their ability to express, organize, support opinions and ideas on a test like this. Language assessments are used both to identify struggling students as well as determine the areas of literacy needing remediation, which we'll get to in a minute. Reading specialists use language assessment scores to recommend further instruction. Reading specialists should have parent conferences in order to explain the reason for the assessment, what the goal of the assessment is, and of course they'll explain the results of the assessment and then the game plan. Diagnostic tests are tests that help to identify issues that students have with language. An example would be a pre-test given at the beginning of a course to determine what the teacher needs to focus on given her particular demographic of students, her or his particular demographic of students. I see you all out there. Progress tests are given throughout the year to see if students are on track, if something needs to be retaught. When remediation techniques are not proven to be effective, then it's time for the reading specialist to come in and intervene. Although known by different terms, students will get used to frequent testing of their language skills, so they may not recognize it as a diagnostic test, but they know they're being tested. Remediation is reteaching. This targets students individually and use the data in order to decide which students need to improve on which skills or standards. This term fits into the process of remediation because it is remediation. When reteaching fails, then intervention would be the next step. The literacy specialist can create strategies to help with remediation, such as placing students in small groups based on similar needs. Students will be assessed to see which ones are not mastering the content and will need to work in small group instruction in order to bring things up to speed. Intervention is targeting specific gaps in learning. So an example would be sound manipulation, where they categorize sounds according to beginning and ending sounds. The term fits into the process because, again, it is intervention. Reading specialists will assess individual students and come up with strategies to address the issues that students are struggling with. Students will be formally assessed and the process will be explained to them. And lastly, progress monitoring is used to observe students while they are receiving the intervention instruction. Students will be observed while performing a sound manipulation activity using the previous example, for instance, and will be assessed to see if the student's goals are being met. Progress monitoring fits into the intervention process because data is collected to show how well the intervention is going, or if intense instruction is still needed. Once a reading specialist sees that a student is showing mastery, then they can be exited from the intervention or they might need to continue on. Students may know they're being progress monitored, however, they might not understand that this monitoring can mean they are exiting the program or it means that they are continuing on. I know I covered a lot here, and you guys are having a busy day full of new information. Hopefully this video will be a good resource for you that you can refer back to when your brains are not spinning with so much information. Good luck to you. I hope you have a great year.